All right, good morning. Again, I want to thank Mr. Adams and the Halldale group for having me and the rest of the PHI guys here to learn, because we are here to learn from the rest of the industry, and hopefully during our presentations we can give you guys something to think about as well and take back to your operations. We're all here to improve training. That's why we're talking about it, whether it's for the end goal of safety or just for the specific taking it a bite at a time and making your training better so that it contributes to the whole program. One way to do that, and that's what I'm going to talk about today, is looking for trends, but how to track those trends. As we go further and further with more and more data available to us, we have to have systems in place to both collect it and then also analyze it to improve our programs going forward. All right, so I got tracking trends for training improvement, and like I said, how we use training management systems to do that. Now, real quick to put this in context, I'm talking more about, like it says up here, program versus event. I'm talking more scope of just for today, just training programs. As instructors, we have a lot of instructors in here. There's various techniques and methods for improving in an individual training event or working with an individual student or pilot or mechanic. I'm more focused on program analysis today, more of a macro or a bigger picture, all right? But when I do that, I don't want to just, you got a PHI guy up here. Again, like I said last night, we're not the biggest operator, but we are pretty big, all right? But where we face challenges is when you have this many different airframes, and you have Antarctica and Ghana, Trinidad, the other places we are now, you have a variety of area of operations, you have a variety of types of airframes, types of pilots, VFR versus IFR, and then you have a large number of that. You have to be able to collect all the information on their performances, on the operations performances. The bigger it gets, the harder it is to collect that and make it meaningful and weed through it and apply it for either failures or successes, which we'll talk about in a little bit. For me as the training director, like I talked about the programs versus event, I'm looking at improving programs. It's the curriculums, whereas and then giving the instructors the tools to do that. All right, so I just wanted to kind of put that in context. That while we're bigger than other operators and we may have a little bit more toys at our disposal, the principle still applies to everybody. All right, so today for the specific discussion, talk about assessing some instructional methodologies, data collection and analysis as far as the training programs go, and then how do we use that for improving and going forward. All right, so again, this audience is a bunch of instructors. You're familiar with what's available to you to teach your courses or your programs. All right, but the reason I bring it up is the variety on it. You got traditional whiteboard and markers. I wish I would have had that yesterday because I would have defaulted to scribbling up here on a whiteboard, all right? But we do have presentations. CBT is a particular challenge under there. Developing or assessing how effective your CBTs are for a guy individually or a gal individually at home working on stuff is a difficult thing to do, all right? So to be able to do that, you got to collect the data from all those various CBTs that students, pilots, mechanics are doing. We're going to, audio, video, and then again, this term I brought up last night, microlearning. Again, people learn, as you know, we're doing 15 to 20-minute presentations. That's a good length for people to absorb that particular topic. We know that through psychology and fundamentals of instruction, things like that. We also know that with the generation of YouTube videos, that microlearning, give it to them in bites so that it goes into the brain and is usable later on, because that's the end goal of all training. You want them to learn as much as possible so they can use it to go out, for our case, take 19 people out, to the deep water and come back every time. And if we make some money and don't damage a helicopter and don't have to do extra paperwork, well, that's benefits on the side. All right. And then obviously we have the hands-on. We have a lot of options of simulation. We're still doing training in the aircraft, and I put practical up there just to cover the maintenance side of it, because I take care of the maintenance training at PHI as well, or oversee it. I don't do much of it, but one aspect of this as well, just going back to what we just talked about on the diversity of the fleet, but we're also talking about the diversity of the methodologies that are available, so organizing the data that comes in from those. And then we talk about demographics. I just gave one of my instructors the other day, gave him a 40-year pin. He's been with PHI for 40 years. Okay? How does that gentleman learn? We kind of had a discussion a little bit about that yesterday, but you know, different people learn different ways. You guys know that. But lots of times it's a generational thing. All right, so we can even fine-tune it even better because, again, the goal is the knowledge is what's important, right? So modifying our methodologies based on the individual kind of group. As we get, you know, I have 22-year-olds flying around on 407 and 206. They're going to learn differently than a generation ago, and then you also have the generation in between. But again, you know, we're assessing that so I can give the instructors the tools to effectively teach. All right, so how do we do that? How do we determine if they're succeeding or not? All right, so we got the traditional tests, right? Check rides, all that good stuff. Grading of the individual lessons even, individual tasks, events. This one's kind of a tricky one when you're talking about data collection. Is it just simple pass-fail? Is it a percentage? The National Aviation Authorities love percentages, right? At least the U.S. one. Or numbered. What we've gone to at PHI is more of a numbered approach. You know, a 1 through 4 or 1 through 5, and they mean different things, and it's easier for us to organize that data. But then you have to equate it to meet the National Aviation Authority. Is a 4 an 80? Is a 3, you know, so you have to develop that within your own systems. Then feedback. We're always hearing things from our instructors. We're hearing things from the students, right? Collecting feedback is a difficult thing, turning it into data, but it's possible, and it's extremely important. Whether the student has ascertained or learned the knowledge is, again, the end goal. And that doesn't always manifest itself as a test grade, all right? And it usually doesn't lots of times. You got to be able to organize all that. And that's where the training management system comes in, especially for us. We have so many different variables coming in to organize that and be able to analyze it later for use, for making changes to our training programs, policies maybe, safety, all that. Now, one thing I didn't put up here because we do have different sized operators and stuff, we just started discussing a little bit yesterday is FDM, flight data monitoring. We have that on all our airframes currently. We are getting triggers and hits from the aircraft down in Antarctica. Again, it's a ton of data. We just went to the real-time hums in some of our S-92s that we displayed at HAI. We've used that recently. We had an aircraft going out. That real-time hum aircraft actually had a gearbox chip, and then the comm center, the ICAS, or the systems page came up, and they were able to supply that crew with additional accelerometer data that you wouldn't normally have available just to you in the cockpit. It's an excellent thing. As we all know, to use the example of aircraft in the Army, the Apache, had a lot of issues with that monocle at the beginning. So much information coming in, it's task saturating the crews and the pilots. We have the same thing happening to us. If we have so much data coming in that we're not able to organize and analyze in an effective manner, you can start, to use a phrase, you can't see the forest because of the trees, right? But the ultimate kind of way to see if you're using that data effectively is the final one. Obviously, safety, we talk about that a lot. There was a lot of discussion about the word zero yesterday, but safety and then also success. I mean, we're not in this, it's a commercial business. So success as well. Obviously, nowadays, safety is a major contributor to that. All right, so we assess all these different methodologies, all these different operations, all these different type of pilots, mechanics. So then we got to take all that information, collect it obviously, but then we're going to analyze it. All right, so a lot of this is kind of tied into what we already discussed, but how do you analyze it? Well, you can start out with just flat out grades. You know, how many guys have failed this check ride this year for the recurrence, or hey, everybody keeps messing up steep turns, so we need to focus on that. That's pretty straightforward. That's how we do it now. How do we do it going forward with all this information and the use of these training management systems? One aspect I want to point out, we talk about assessing the methodologies, over here, we talk about just grading the instruction. I have roughly 36 in-house instructors, and then we have some contract instructors as well with flight safety and some of the manufacturers. Instructors are bulletproof, right? They made it to that point. They're infallible, and unfortunately, that's not the case. We're all human beings. We're not robots, all right? So there's a lot to learn. The bigger the group, there's a lot to learn. You can see trends within your instructional staff, all right? So again, as the director of training and standards manager, that's my job, is to help those guys. I can't affect 360 plus pilots. Not at the level I would like to as an instructor, but what I can affect is 35 to 36 instructors, and then they work with 10 pilots that month, and they can, eventually you are going to affect a larger population, all right? So like I said, the instruction part of it is something we're all, not just the training programs and safety and products, but we've got to look at ourselves. It's still a human interaction. You still got to get better at that, and you can track that through the trends. And it's not necessarily just this is the check pilot that always busts this guy or busts the group on this one maneuver. Everybody, you know, everybody gets their reputation out there. But it's also, we have a gentleman who's a manager down in Trinidad now. We used to call him the pilot whisperer. If we had a guy that was just struggling with something, he was the one you sent him to, especially if it was about systems or if it was about a policy or something. Instructors start separating themselves in certain topics. You have the guy that's good at aeromedical. You have the guy that's good at aerodynamics, spatial disorientation, you know, policies and procedures. All right, so through the trend tracking, you can start seeing that. You can start seeing how to best assign instructors, show them areas where they need to improve, where they've gotten kind of stagnant on areas, and improve it going forward. Now, one aspect I want to also point out is this word success. If we get to 0, which we've discussed before, you know, in the past it's always you got to wait for something to get bent up, crashed, bust a check ride, something negative has to happen, right? Eventually, the end goal is to get where that stuff's not happening, right? So we're going to have to look at successes. For example, we're getting ready to field a new airframe for oil and gas use. We can go off of previous successes in the recent history of fielding a new airframe, what worked, and not necessarily what didn't work, but what actually worked, and you can apply that to how you're assessing your training programs as well. And again, this is where the training management systems come in, to be able to analyze all that data. What worked? Hey, when we fielded this last piece of equipment, we used this instructional method, and whether that was just a CBT or I actually sent instructors out to the field at each base, and they helped field it. You know, what worked? And we can duplicate that and use it in the future. Not just what failed. All right, so it's a continual process. You're constantly looking at this. And to be able to do that, again, you have to have it organized. You'll be all over the map of your training programs if you're just randomly chasing things as they come up. In fact, to be successful, we find that we've got to stay out in front of, anticipating what the new either issue is going to be or anticipating ways to field a new program. Just like we talked about with safety, we're trying to identify trends before they get to that point where it's a failure. And it's the same thing in training. Start identifying a trend. What I have here is success can change. As you guys know as instructors, sometimes randomly you'll have a group of, let's say I have about 104 S-92 pilots. And they're just going along, everything's fine, and all of a sudden you just have a rash of basic attitude instrument flying is bad at recurrent, or wrong deck landings, or other issues. And why did it pop up all of a sudden? We didn't change a policy, we didn't change a procedure. Did it fall off as a focus during our training? Was there a customer change? Things like that. You can start seeing that in training if you have effective management systems to be able to look at that. You can start seeing those trends before they become a rash of, or a trend, a full length trend where it turns into a major issue. So again, I want to highlight, we talked about success of duplicating what works, but again, that can change. So it's a continual process. We're always looking for ways to make it better. All right, so we've assessed all this, we've collected all this data, we've analyzed it. Now again, we keep talking about we're trying to make it better going forward, but it's not just the current staff. It's not just the guys that you have, the guy that's either been there the 40 years or just hired on or whatever. It's also new hires going forward. How do you improve that hiring process? So we talked, Philip had yesterday, aptitude, looking at aptitude when they get there. Based on my training program success in the past or training program failures in the past, or all this data that I analyze as part through my training management system, how can I start these people out through that primacy to develop that culture within the company that we want? The training management system is tying all that together for us. And also future training programs, I want to highlight that. As we move forward into more of an AQP, an advanced qualification kind of mindset. At PHI, we're looking at, we don't want to just see the pilot twice a year. We don't want to see him, you know, for his 4-day recurrent, and then for the PICs, and actually we just started doing IFR checks for the SICs, but at the 6-month mark. It's twice a year. And we've all been there. The guy shows up and the rationalization starts, right? When they first sit down, I haven't done a tail rotor malfunction in a year, so here goes. But the guy had to be able to accomplish that EP yesterday before he came to recurrent. This is not requal, it's recurrent. It's an opportunity to work on some things, get more comfortable. But how do you do that? And part of that, I mean, even the instructors, again, we're not bulletproof. If I haven't touched an aircraft in a year and I jump right into the thing, I don't care how good you are, how much experience you have, you're a human being, those skills go away. So whether it's a quarterly, there's a bunch of different ways to do that out there. We have to move toward more of an ongoing training process. All right? Now, as we do that, you just increase the amount of data. You just increase the amount of grades, feedback, all those methodologies that I talked about. So again, that's where those, as we move toward those future programs, to be able to accurately use all this information, we have to have some way of organizing it. Now, these training management systems, it's not just with the training. You know, they're taking care of things like scheduling, pilot qualifications. It all ties in together, so you're not having to tie in a bunch of different systems. All right, and like I said, I always like putting this and just finishing up with this or highlight this, safety and success on the end. The goal of all of this, regardless of what system you use, if it's with a vendor, we use Fox for our training management system. If it's a smaller operator and you know that you can keep a handle on it, you can develop something in-house. You got to develop a system to be able to make sure that you're, again, I like tying it in with where we're going with our safety management systems. We're looking at those things before they become an issue. And we're also duplicating successes. All right, so to finish up, again, we hit the methodologies, the analysis, and building future training programs. Again, as we go toward more of an ongoing training process for us to meet those FAA requirements of recurrence and 297s, 299s, line checks, all that stuff, we're doing that because we want to see our pilots more often, especially in the oil and gas world. For those of you that have done that, it's as close to a regional airline as you can get, where you're doing the north-south, especially in the Gulf of Mexico, day in and day out. As you do that, from fundamentals instruction, you get that overlearning of knowledge, where the actual aspect of going out to a rig that's 200 miles offshore becomes the actual skill, instead of all the individual skills that you used to make decisions on to accomplish that task. And so other skills kind of drop off. It just becomes do the same route, IFR, there and back, and you forget all the little decision making that you used to make. If we bring them in more often, talk to them more often, let them work on those skills that they're not using more often, just through that law of exercise or repetition, they're going to maintain those skills so that, unfortunately, when those instances do come up where they have to use them, they're more comfortable with it. To back that up, to back up that training, where does it need to be focused? Because still, even if I saw them every day, I wouldn't be able to give as much as I wanted to give them. We got to track it through systems. We got to be able to analyze data on safety and all these other things that, you know, money, finances, we do a lot of analysis on that. We don't do enough analysis on our training. And it all contributes to the same goal. All right, so I'm going to finish up there, but does anybody have any questions on training management systems? our training program development.
Any questions?
Do you have different tools that you use as part of the training management systems that you sponsor?
So
Programs that all interface together?
it is. So we had a scheduling application. We had one for pilot qualifications. We had one for mechanic qualifications, a different program. We were eventually going to use that for a learning management system as well. We currently use Moodle for that. So we were all over the map. And what we were finding is you were finding answers in all those different areas, but they were in different areas. And not everybody, like a training director was getting a look at that. So we're combining all that into one program. And you'll be able to, it's much more powerful and flexible on the reports it can generate and the information it can give to us. We can, just like most modern searches and things, you can tailor it so that it spits out what you're looking for to answer that particular question of the day.
You do the air medical side as well, like crew members?
Yep, so the air medical guys are going to be using Fox as well. So it'll be, we're going to pioneer it on the oil and gas side. We typically do that, and then we help out the other certificates, get it fielded. But the air medical guys are definitely going to the same system.
And this is a little bit of a spread, but can that do crew qualifications in terms of the medical qualifications as well? Not their annual from a pilot standpoint, but say a medical crew member needs to be a crew member on board the aircraft, plus the medical side like the track their nurse and paramedic certifications.
Right. So these systems nowadays, they're robust enough that you can build qualifications as you want to. Absolutely. Yes. Yeah, we absolutely do. We're doing that a lot right now. Again, we just initiated 6-month checks for our SICs, IFR. That's not an FAA, that's not a regulatory requirement, but it's a standard, it's an industry standard, or the direction the industry is going. So we went ahead and do that, so we built that qualification as an example.
So for instance, I guess, and that's an above and beyond efficiency standard based on how the FAA requires. That's great work. Well, what tends to happen when we don't have those systems that fulfill the requirement, because requirements are so vast that you don't put in the efficiency costs not per se throughout the course of the year. So that's great.
Yeah, and again, we've really expanded internationally lately, and to be able to track all the various National Aviation Authority requirements, to have a system that can do that, the end goal being we want to have a global standard across our whole company that meets all those. So that really helps for international operators. And when I say international, I mean more than one location.
Right.
And does your data logging system interface with your training management system for analyzing the training effectiveness? Does it go to that?
That it's one and the same. Yes, it all comes into the same database, and then again we can tailor how we pull it back out based on just basic drop downs or filters, things like that. So absolutely.
Can you just help me out? Give me an example, like, for instance, are you capturing like standard code profiles and see it?
Okay, so you're talking. Okay, so you're talking about the data monitoring as well. Okay, now so the aircraft data monitoring is going to be separate. That's a proprietary. Right. So what we can do is when we see, there's hundreds of variables on that data monitoring, hundreds of variables. It's just really something else. We have a group of 8 or 9 people. That's all they do is dictate where the trigger points are, on various thresholds, pitch angles, airspeeds at this altitude. And one tricky one that we ran into was how do you dictate a stabilized approach going to a rig, because the rig could be 200 feet off the water, it could be 100 feet off. Where did the approach start? So they had to get creative on how they figured that out. So we used that system to kind of figure out that would be an instance where something broke, or maybe it's after an incident or an accident if that happened. That could highlight areas that we need to go to the data and pull out. When you have so much of it, sometimes as you filter, it's impossible to anticipate where you need to go every time. So when you do have those incidents, you can go over to the training management system and pull out, hey, do we see a trend in training that may have caused, and not just for these 2 pilots in this instance of this crew, is it across the fleet? Is it across the airframe? Is it just that area of operation? And that's where we have that ability to kind of fine tune. So.
Okay, thank you, Sam, for your expertise and your persistence.
Yep. Yes, sir. I appreciate it.